Now, something cheery for a Wednesday morning. Death is an unavoidable truth. The only questions are how and when. But is there anything you can do to delay the inevitable? Well, in his new book, Live Forever, the professor of immunology at Imperial College, John Tregoning, looks at how our bodies, against all odds, keep us alive and how we can live longer if we learn to age better. And I'm pleased to say that John joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for being here. Is there, look, big question up first, is there a simple answer to the key to a long and happy life?
Yeah, there is actually. It's do more of the things that you like with people you love. Social connectivity is the most important thing we can do to live a qualitatively better and quantitatively better life.
Presumably some of the things we like might be bad for us. If the things I like are eating cake and drinking booze, then perhaps, whether I love the people I'm doing it with or not.
Yeah, I mean, within moderation. Of course,
Yep.
It's very hard to ignore the kind of the big four. Don't smoke, drink to moderation, eat healthily and do exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, the social element is really important. And the social element explains a lot of things that are good for us and yet don't quite make sense. So dancing, for example, is really good because it's cognitive. You have to think about what you're doing. It's exercise, so you're making exercise, and it's social. So things where you interplay those three things are the things that are going to make you live better and longer.
Wow, okay, that's good. So look, in your book, you set out to examine which anti-aging processes and tips work and which you just shouldn't waste your time and money on. Let's get negative first. Take us through some sort of widespread health advice that we can just throw out the window.
So I think a lot of it is you don't need to spend lots of money on doing health fads. So one of the things I did was I did an extreme calorie reduction diet. So
Right.
I paid £200 and I got 3,000 calories for my £200. You can buy 80,000 calories of caramel wafers for the same amount. So the putting myself through this week of misery for that much money was crazy. So you can reduce calories, yes, but don't pay somebody else to reduce them for you.
Are you saying you could have as effectively done the reduce the calories diet if you'd only been eating caramel wafers? Because I'm not a doctor, but I don't know, that doesn't sound right.
No, that would be terrible advice. But you really need to eat less than you're doing. So
Yeah.
as long as output is greater than input, you will lose weight, and you can vary it. The timing may be different, and a lot of it's about compliance. So some people might find it easier to do 5-2. Some people might find it easier to fast up till a certain time of the day. But it's mostly about how much you're eating rather than the kind of the timing and the process.
Right, so even if you're doing it consistently, that makes sense. Look, much of the research in the book came from self-experimentation. Tell us some of the things you did to yourself.
Yeah, so I did. I've got a long list. I'm going to read it off because aging and my brain's going a little bit. But I tried gene sequencing, whole body analysis. I had an ECG. I did more exercise, cold water swimming. I ate beetroot. I ate less salt. A lot of it was food related, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I tried dry January, an alcohol replacement, less red meat, more vegetables, brain training apps, sleeping more, calorie restriction, eating more fibre, trying kimchi, sequencing my microbiome and drinking more water. So I did a whole range of these puritanical things.
Picking one of those at random, cold water swimming, does that work even if you don't talk about it?
So I did a whole week of it. The first day I lasted a whole 5 minutes, and that was only because there was somebody else on the beach watching me, and I felt embarrassed at the speed at which I got out of the water. I then looked at the scientific literature. It is not particularly strong. The biggest, kind of the best review I read, the way it covered it, it said that for people who are good swimmers, it can have some benefits, but it does have risks of drowning, hypothermia, and heart attacks. So the things need to be balanced in it. But and it is a bit culty. My sister's a big fan. I've got lots of colleagues at work who will all be kind of tutting at me for saying this, but I think the benefit from cold water swimming is doing it with friends in beautiful places. And it's this, again, it's like the dancing, it's the social, it's the cognitive, it's the exercise. All of those things come together and they benefit you. So if it's something you enjoy and you're good at it, then do it. But it's not without risk. And water is dangerous.
Look, as you did a lot of these things to yourself, that is obviously quite subjective. Presumably your aim in doing these was not so much to test the results, but more of an sort of experiential thing.
Yeah, it was about learning. So the the way I kind of approached it is I read around the subject. I applied my 25 years of scientific research kind of experience to understanding it properly. I have a big network of experts who I could speak to. So for each of the areas, I could speak to a subject matter expert, and then I would look at a single thing in a way to kind of explore it and to understand it better.
Right. Okay. There is one chapter looking at the role of DNA and genetic makeup. How much of disease and shortened lifespans, indeed lengthened lifespans, is just predetermined and there's nothing we can really do about it?
There is a whole sliding scale of these things. There are some things that are really set in stone. So if you have the gene for Huntington's, you will have a shorter life. Or if you have the CF gene, a cystic fibrosis gene. So that's a specific mutation that means your lungs don't clear mucus in the same way. So you get infections much more. Those will really determine your life in a particular way. Other things are risk factors. So you will have certain predispositions to certain conditions, but then it's about the environment and things layering on. So it's both nature and nurture are really both important together.
So you can reduce some risk factors?
Yes, I think so. But the predictions are quite complicated. We have 25,000 genes. The numbers and the stats, we actually are really individual, unique snowflakes. You know, the complexities of our bodies and the exposures that we go through, the way biology and stats work don't really apply. It's so complicated that we can't really individually isolate what one person's risk is. But there are broad categories that you can fall into.
Tell us about epigenetics and how that applies to this, and indeed what it is.
Okay, so the genetics of the DNA, each of your cells has a copy of DNA. That's the kind of instruction manual about how to make a cell and how to make you. Epigenetics are little markers on the DNA that then inform the kind of cell. It's like bookmarks. It says this gene is more useful. So if you're a red blood cell, your bookmark for hemoglobin will be higher, more accessible because you need to make more of it. Over time, our bodies lay down epigenetic markers on different genes according to exposures and according to risk, and it may alter the expression patterns of certain things. So that what it's actually saying is that genetics isn't just about the DNA itself; it's about how it's used and how your cells express the genes and the proteins from that.
Okay. Post-pandemic, during the pandemic, there's been a whole new, stronger movement of, I guess, I'm not quite sure how to put it, but sort of like lifestyle purity. People who shun all kinds of, not only sort of processed foods, which we might think is very wise, but also would shun vaccines, would shun medicines, just think, leave my body alone, it knows what it's doing. Are these people likely to live longer than the rest of us?
So it was if you've seen Blackadder, there's the bit in Blackadder where he says Baldrick says to Johnson sausages at the end, and he's forgotten to add it to the dictionary. I work on vaccines. Vaccines are an amazing way to extend your life. They extend the life of children very clearly, so reduce the risk of dying in childhood. But actually, as adults and elderly adults, the risk of getting infected with something like influenza or RSV is very high. You're not only going to shorten your life by getting sick if you don't get vaccinated, but actually from the disease itself. But influenza, if you get an influenza infection, a whole year later, you have a much higher risk of a heart disease as well. So vaccination protects us against infectious disease, but also non-communicable diseases.
Some of the advice is quite unique, such as the importance of keeping your toenails trimmed. Why is that so important?
So it's not as much the toenail trimming, but it's a indication that doctors who look after the elderly see as a way of determining the general state of health. So if you're able to bend down, cut your own toenails, then that indicates that you're still flexible, you're still mobile, you still care about your own body, and so that may indicate a state of mind as much as a state of physical health.
Okay, that's good to know. Another piece of advice that I think one article on this covered, which I've got to bring up, even though it's not really sort of breakfast chat, the importance for men of frequent ejaculation. Talk about that as carefully as you can on the radio.
So there was a study that I came across with the remarkable name of the Harvard ejaculation study.
Right.
And they had split a cohort. It was quite a large cohort, so it was 6,000 or so people, and they split them into people who ejaculated more than 21 times a month in a certain period of their life and less than 21 times a month.
Right.
And the people who
they found some less than 21 times a month. That's very impressive.
It wasn't a teenage cohort. And the group who ejaculated less had a slightly higher risk of prostate cancer.
Right.
So and whether again that is a direct causal thing, or it's again come back to this cognitive social exercise, if you're linking it together, but there does seem to be a risk factor within. And the best thing, but for me, the most amusing part of it was I got to quote or cite the Vis Profanosaurus in the book, which I don't think many academics get to do.
What did you quote, or can you not say it on the radio?
It was a DSB, so you can look it up later.
Is this? I asked this extremely carefully. Is this another thing it's better to do with friends?
So I imagine the social element is really important. Yes.
Right. Okay. Understood. Look, people like Brian Johnson have become like internet sensations for apparently aging backwards using quite scary methods to stay young. What's your take on people going to like extremes to live forever, to preserve their bodies in perhaps artificial ways?
Yeah, so we're both looking at, I think we're both looking at a similar question, and we've taken very different kind of hypotheses and approaches to it. And it's very hard to test as a kind of true scientific hypothesis. It needs to be disprovable. So if I say I'm going to die and somebody else says I'm not going to die, that's a very hard experiment to really run out properly. I find his approach of valuing quantity over quality, I mean, it may work out to be true, but I don't think the sort of what he's proposing to me doesn't seem like a pleasant way to live. And even if you get 5 more years at the end, if you've been miserable and you're going to bed at 3 PM and you're not eating and you don't, you're losing that social connectivity, I think there's a risk of quality of life being so poor that you don't need the extra quantity anyhow.
It's the whole you don't live longer, it just feels longer kind of thing. Finally, is there a wealth divide here? Is it easier to live longer and better if you are rich? Or to turn that around, is it hard to live longer and well if you're not rich?
Yeah, absolutely. The huge risk factor for shorter age in all countries, and particularly UK and many other countries, is wealth. So if you look at the Glasgow Tube network, as you go from west to east, for every train stop from west to east, you lose 2 years of life expectancy as going across the city. So, and that comes across in so many factors. It may be working shift patterns. It may be access to not such good food, poorer housing, and so lots of stresses on life. So it is a really challenging area, and sort of equity through increasing wealth and access to health is really important in extending the nation's age.
Well, look, Catherine sent a text while we were talking. She says, I like this guy a lot. I'm going to bake a chocolate cake and eat it with my husband while we watch PMQs Unpacked later, and we shall live to 100. I'm not sure that's totally the message, Catherine, but we're happy for you to take it away. John Tregoning, thank you very much indeed. John is Professor of Vaccine Immunology at Imperial College London, and the book is Live Forever, A Curious Scientist's Guide to Wellness, Aging and Death, and it's out tomorrow.